Hello and welcome to Red, White, and Bi.
I'm Hannah.
And I'm Ash.
And guys, guess what episode it is? It's our 10th. That's right, double digits.
And it's also
our anniversary week. Ash and I got married this week 3 years ago. So we had a little celebratory dinner, had a big celebration for Ash's favorite holiday besides her anniversary, which is Independence Day.
I love Independence Day. It reminds me of how beautiful the country is. And I shared with Hannah this tradition that I have every 4th of July, which is to watch Whitney Houston sing the Star Spangled Banner in 1991 at the Super Bowl.
Which was a whole, Whitney Houston singing the Star Spangled Banner is a time and place in America. And I would be lying if I said I did not openly weep watching it. It was just, God, what a time to be. I feel bad for kids who don't remember the 90s.
Yeah, I remember probably maybe one of the times I was maddest at a president in my lifetime was when Obama said that he believed in American exceptionalism the same way a Greek would believe in Greek exceptionalism.
Why did that make you mad?
Because I think America is exceptional, more exceptional than any other country in the history of the world. And all you need to see is that height of American exceptionalism with Whitney Houston singing the Star Spangled Banner at the same time as the Bush Senior White House was kicking ass and taking names in Desert Storm to be like, we really ruled when we ruled, man.
I'm an open agnostic, and I feel like there are times in American history where it's like something special happened.
Yeah.
Whether you want to call it the universe or God or, whatever it is that you believe in, even just random luck. There's been to quote the song, there's been a grace shed on this country that you see glimpses. Obviously we have dark parts of our history too, but you'll see little glimpses of just how the hell did we pull that off? And I feel like the economic boom of the 90s is an example of that. I feel like Whitney Houston's voice is unlike maybe any voice that has ever existed before. The pipes on that woman, incomparable. And it was just that little glimmer of specialness that nobody deserves, but we were lucky enough to enjoy.
Yeah, there was actually a point made by Dennis Prager, who is a radio host who's very ill right now, so sending thoughts and prayers to Dennis Prager. And he actually pointed out that one of God's first promises to man was freedom. Mm-hmm. And I really believe when we see the United States that we are one of his chosen countries because of the way we once lived so free, and the 90s was a great example of that. And I feel like the more freedom we have, the more we're blessed with good things.
Amen. So, Ash, what are you drinking tonight in light of our holiday weekend, our anniversary weekend?
Yeah, I've got more Evan Williams cherry bourbon with a Coke.
Classic. So we took a trip to Total Wine the other day to pick up some stuff for the holiday to take to where we were going to celebrate. And there was this, I think it's a Japanese brand of gin called Akori, and they had a yuzu flavored gin, and I think it's really light and citrusy. I don't know that I taste the yuzu so much as just the regular juniper flavor of gin. But, citrus is for summer, so I put it with a sparkling lemon water and a little bit of lime juice. Really good.
Yeah, I'm not much of a gin girl, but it does smell really good, actually.
Fresh. Mm-hmm. Cool. Well, guys, a couple things happened this week, and, we'll talk about it just briefly. The big, beautiful bill, I think we called it a giant corn-fed 9-pound baby. I didn't expect anything to happen this fast, but it did pass both the House and the Senate. So I guess that is a legitimate corn-fed adult now. So we have that. Poor Texas is experiencing some flash flooding.
Then, of course, the president made an anti-Semitic slur. And this time it wasn't Biden. So that's a surprise.
So lots of progress being made. But we did want to mix it up a little bit because we realized we've been kind of just like following the news cycle and talking about that. But at the heart of what we set out to do, that's not really everything that we wanted this podcast to be about. We wanted it to be about talking about ideas that maybe don't necessarily change with the news cycle, like discussing wedge topics or like a little bit more baseline stuff that isn't going to be different day to day. And I think, tell me if you agree here, I think discussing abortion a little bit at the end of our last episode sort of reminded us that it's like, hey, we don't have to just be chasing the news cycle.
Yeah, I'm proud that we're going to try something new. And we're going to have a special 4th of July, Independence Day weekend for you where we're going to shake things up a little bit and we're going to take a political compass test for you guys.
Ash, what is the political compass quiz?
So essentially, I feel like people place themselves in left or right, usually because somebody labeled their views either Republican or Democrat, and that's the end of the story for most people. But you may have heard of a political compass, but I would encourage you to just take a test because it's actually kind of fun, and you would figure out where you are technically on a political scale. You've got a vertical axis that is basically how authoritarian you are or how libertarian you are in terms of how much government you want involved in your daily life and social issues. And then the other axis is basically going to be how much government intervention you want in terms of fiscal issues. And I feel like this is where people really get turned around, because if you want fiscal freedom, you can't be left wing. And if you don't want any, you are left wing. And I feel like I say often on this podcast that I think Trump is left wing because he likes tariffs and seems like he likes government when it suits him. And that to me is not somebody who's right wing.
So the results are kind of cool because you can see, and I'm a really visual person, so I think we're going to post a picture like on the Instagram, or maybe like make it the image for this episode on Spotify or whatever. We haven't worked that detail out yet, but we're going to post a basic interpretation picture of what we're talking about here. But you can kind of see where you fall at the end of this test if you are in favor of more or less government control over your life or more or less tight spending in the government. But what I like about it is that it also kind of gives you some famous political figures that are close to your results. So you could say like, hey, I'm a classical liberal close to so-and-so, or I am a Marxist fascist close to someone else.
Yeah, so it's kind of fun. And you kind of get to see yourself in the context of history, and then you might actually surprise yourself over where you fall. Like, a lot of people think that Hitler was right wing, and they are shocked to learn that he was actually on the left side of the fiscal scale, and therefore he's a left winger.
And actually, Ash and I had this conversation earlier today where I was, I've been consistently annoyed at the label conservative and liberal because they're descriptions of two different. They're like two different answers to two different questions in my mind. So and correct me if I'm wrong here, Ash, but I think we decided that conservatism is in reference to conserving the Constitution as much as possible and keeping it as literal and original as possible, whereas liberal refers to personal liberty.
Yes.
And how much like freedom from government rule you want. So it's like two descriptors of two different unrelated things. And to me, it just really drives me crazy when you hear somebody calling someone a conservative who wants like a Christian authoritarian president. That's not conservative.
Right.
Or somebody who calls themselves liberal, but they want totally socialized everything with like government in schools and all this other stuff. That's not liberal.
Yeah, and to your point, it's especially annoying when you're not doing like an apples to apples comparison and someone is using the word conservative to mean like tradition and like, family values and religion. They might apply conservative. Mm-hmm. And somebody who is a liberal might use the word when they really mean that they're a progressive socialist Democrat or something. It's just like, can we just decide what words mean? Because I know that this is like Orwellian doublespeak and all this weird stuff, but it's kind of off-footing.
The labels get problematic for sure. And I know, Ash, one of your pet peeves is when people will call extreme, however you want to say it for the purposes of like an extreme Democrat, like somebody who is extremely on the left. Many people will call that person liberal, but Ash is very careful and always makes a point to use the word correctly. Those aren't liberals, those are leftists.
Yeah, leftist, progressive, whatever you want to say. But daverubin, I've made a reference to him before on this podcast. He considers himself a liberal in the traditional sense. He likes, like safety nets for people, but he's more like a John F. Kennedy liberal than, like what we would say is a modern quote unquote liberal. So he calls them the regressive left. And I think it's fair. It's a little, like the term might seem harsh to people who feel labeled by that, but progressive, leftist, democratic socialist, to me, that all falls under the same umbrella. I would say I'm a classical liberal. Mm-hmm. And if someone heard me who didn't like know all about this call myself a classical liberal, they'd probably be like, what? She's not a liberal.
Record scratch. She's a what?
She's a what?
So I think like both sides have kind of picked an attribute that is really positive and really like the most optimistic descriptor of their political beliefs, but you wind up with two words that have ceased to mean anything meaningful. I know for my part, like just to show the other side of what you're saying, as I've drifted, I don't even know that I've drifted toward the right, but the left has drifted into something that I don't identify with anymore. So I know that the friends that kind of have drifted away with that, and I feel this distance between a lot of the friends I used to have even just a few years ago, because the intellectual path of the left side is just so far out, I can't follow it anymore. I don't even see it anymore. I see these people still on social media and everything, and their attacks on conservatism or Republicans are always like rich white old man who's a Christian and wants to make the 10 Commandments like United States law. And it's like, I realize that is many people's idea of a conservative, but that's not what conservative means, because that's not what the founding fathers had in mind. They wanted religious freedom. They wanted separation of church and state. So long story short, we're going to go through and we're going to take this quiz. We thought it'd be fun to take it live. I imagine we're going to edit a lot of it out. So we're going to provide sources so that you can go through these questions yourself. It's always a really useful tool, I think, to understand what's important to you and what it really means to say out loud, and to use the language of conservatism or liberal or left or right properly, separate from how we are used to hearing them in the news.
And one more note, if you guys like this episode, when it comes time for another midterm election or the next presidential election, we might also visit You Decide, which will tell you the political candidates or the political parties you most align with.
So I think it's a great idea, because I think Ash and I are different enough in what we want politically, what we want to see from a political party, that I think we would get two different answers, which would be fun to do live and just sort of explore what that means for us. So without further ado, we're going to pull out our phones and we're going to get started. So question 1, if economic globalization is inevitable, it should primarily serve humanity rather than the interest of transnational corporations.
I would say that I strongly disagree, because I believe that transnational corporations hire people, and that if they do well, they actually serve the interest of their employees.
I guess I'm going to just be really honest when I take this, because I'm not as politically savvy as Ash, and I maybe am being a little naive, but my gut reaction is that I strongly agree with this statement. I think that humans and individuals are the primary directive and should be protected over companies. So,
and I would say that like a a progressive talking point or a leftist talking point is often that corporations aren't people. And I would say corporations are made up of people, so they are.
Fair. All right, number 2, I'd always support my country, whether it was right or wrong.
I feel like, no, I wouldn't. So I'm going to say disagree.
Yeah, I also chose disagree. I think it's hard for me to imagine being part of a country that I wouldn't at least partially support at all times. But I'm trying to put myself in a place of like, what if I lived in, I don't even know a good example. I don't want to offend anybody, but like, what if I lived in a different country that was really like violating human rights and on the wrong side of every global opinion, and maybe we are, I don't know. I think there's something to be said for sticking up for your team, but I'm not opposed to ditching if it's that bad.
And I would say it's probably more nuanced because sometimes you can support your country but not your government. And sometimes maybe if, let's just say, go back to the days of Hitler, if the whole country seems like, for the most part, they've fallen for someone who's really like taking the country down a bad path, maybe all you could do at that point is flee.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to cutting and running if need be. So next question. No one chooses their country of birth, so it's foolish to be proud of it. I'm going to say disagree right off the bat. I'll go first this time. The reason I disagree with that is because if you're asking like a 10-year-old, that should be a strong agree. Like you are through no fault of your own, live where you live. But like at this point, I'm 38. I live here. I have chosen to stay here. I vote for the government that I have. I have at least a very fractional, tiny part in the reason my country is the way it is. So, and I've chosen to stay. So I am proud of it. I'm a piece of it.
Yeah, and I would say that although most traits that are just intrinsic or just come to us naturally that we have no part in, I feel like we should be proud of accomplishments, but not necessarily like things that just come along for the ride.
Mm-hmm.
I will say that I think being an American is something to be proud of because I feel like we are an exceptional country who has done amazing things, and I'm part of that just by being an American myself, and I feel a sense of pride.
Yeah, like even if it's just something that makes us feel better,
Mm-hmm.
like I had a tiny part in the reason things are the way they are. Like even if that's sort of just something I tell myself,
Yeah.
like whatever, I do tell myself that. All right, moving on. Oh, geez, this next one. Our race has many superior qualities compared with other races. That's just bullshit. And I think especially for Americans, it's bullshit because we're not a race. We are a literal melting pot.
Yeah.
And there is nothing genetic or ethnic about anybody that makes them American.
Yeah, so I would agree with that too. I'll say strongly disagree on that one.
Next is a little bit Art of War-esque. The enemy of my enemy is my friend.
For that, I'm going to say agree, but not strongly agree, because I think there are times strategically when that can be true. But if you agreed with it too fully, that other new friend could really take advantage of that situation.
New friend could turn out to be an asshat.
Your new friend could be someone that you shouldn't have trusted.
Okay, and I chose agree also. I think if you need to think on your feet for like global politics and allies and enemies, like that's an ever-changing situation, I imagine. So like, yeah, for the situation at hand, maybe the enemy of your enemy is your friend, like in one small aspect, like trade or something. But I don't know, trust no bitch.
So military action that defies international law is sometimes justified.
I have follow-up questions here. Who sets international law? Like, what are we talking about?
Yeah, I would definitely say, again, this is probably nuanced, that under most circumstances, one would hope we would never do anything that would defy international law. But at the same time, I think there are probably sets of circumstances when maybe you need to use enhanced interrogation tactics because you're actually in a war zone and people are coming to get you or something that we might not even really be able to fathom. So for this, I'll just say agree, but I mean that as loosely as possible. I don't strongly agree with that statement or anything.
I do feel like I'm a little out of my depth here. Like, I guess I don't understand what it takes to get the intelligence that's needed to conduct war or international politics. I don't understand what happens in war, and I'm lucky to say so. Like, that's something that's so far removed from my everyday experience that I'm not really sure what that entails, and I'm certainly no lawyer. I don't understand international law. I know, like, with some of the conflicts in the Middle East lately, there were talks about like a international court.
Yeah.
And I can say, just from my short exposure to that, I never heard about it before. I didn't agree with everything the international courts were saying.
Yeah.
So, like, if we're talking about the Geneva Convention or something, okay, I think those are good rules that were established for a reason and we should follow those. But as far as whoever this international court is, like, I guess I'm not sure. So leave that to the smarter folks.
So there is now a worrying fusion of information and entertainment.
I just marked strongly agree. I think that news has become troublingly unreliable. I do think it's a form of entertainment. I think that, like, the sources of information we have at hand are so confusing and so biased. I looked up something earlier this week, and I'm not going to get into the topic of what it was, but it was a pretty simple question about a news headline. And all the information I could find was from TikTok.
Wow.
So that's, like, not vetted, not sourced. And I know it's a source for a lot of people's news information. So yeah, if you're going to tell me it's not entertainment at that point.
And I feel like some people are entertained, not me, but some people are entertained by Tucker Carlson. And I think Tucker Carlson is a tumbling dickweed. And
a tumbling dickweed is hilarious.
And really, it's like somebody might like that he cackles like a crazy person and think that's entertaining. I, for one, think he's a scary gerbil. But, to each their own. But yes, he's not a good information source, in my opinion.
Well, and you look at everybody who's made their money on grifting, like Candace fucking Owens. Like, I know one individual who thinks that she's, like, intelligent and well-informed. And it's like, if you don't realize this for the money-grubbing bullshit controversy peddling that it is, I don't even know what to tell you. All right. Controlling inflation is more important than controlling unemployment.
Yes.
I'm gonna agree. I'm not gonna, well.
Because here's the answer. The government should not be controlling jobs or increasing inflation. And they try to do both. And if they butt it out, it's my opinion that everything would be better.
The real problem is that anyone is trying to control inflation. If you just did hands off, there would be nothing to control.
And every time the government creates jobs, like Obama with his quote-unquote shovel-ready programs.
Ew.
Hannah and I listened to the 1964 Time for Choosing speech by Ronald Reagan, and at that time in 1964, he said 1 out of every 6 Americans was working for the government.
That is too damn high.
Yes.
That is incredible. Like, can any other industry say that?
And they're on the dole. They're like paid in taxpayer money, and that's not good for the economy.
Jesus.
So, anyway.
Okay, next. Because corporations cannot be trusted to voluntarily protect the environment, they require regulation. I think I feel a little of my leftist roots here. I do feel like sometimes profit is inappropriately prioritized. And so I'm not going to say strongly agree, but I am going to agree. I think somebody needs to be the parent.
Yeah, and I'm going to say strongly disagree on that one because drill, baby, drill, I don't give a shit about the environment. I don't think anything we're doing to it is a problem.
Well, agree to disagree there.
Yeah.
Next one, quote, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need, is a fundamentally good idea.
And I would say no, because then you're having the government is determining these things. Like they decide that somebody who's really rich has, too much. I don't want billionaires. And I have taken and given to somebody according to his need, which is also determined by, these elites in a far distant capital. And so this to me is a socialist statement, one of those things that's made to sound good, but is very detrimental to society.
Yeah, I agree in that I think the quote itself is a nice idea. I think if you maybe had like a small classroom of kids and could implement this idea, that might be cool. Or like the give a penny, take a penny thing you see at a 7-Eleven. Like, that's fine. But I need to know who's determining need and ability.
Yeah.
And in this case, it's Big Brother, and I don't trust him.
Yeah. Harrison Bergeron, please report to the cafeteria. So the freer the market, the freer the people. I will agree with this because I think the more a man can control his own money, or a woman, the better off they are. And that's something that one of my heroes, Margaret Thatcher, always said was like the basis of a free society was an individual controlling as much of their own money as possible.
I also, Mark, strongly agree. I think that is the basis of the American dream. The idea that like somebody can't go out and start a business unless they have $1 billion from their parents as seed money. That's not because anyone can do anything. That's because people are trying to control the market. So I don't know. In my opinion, anything can happen in a free market. You make your own destiny. No one's going to say it's easy, but that possibility is there if it's free. All right, next statement we have. It's a sad reflection on our society that something as basic as drinking water is now a bottled, branded consumer product.
I actually had a friend on the left who had a real problem with Nestle being in Michigan. And here's the thing.
Because they were selling Great Lakes water.
Here's the thing. I don't have the means to bottle, purify, and distribute drinking water, but Nestle does. And then if I am in a rush at a gas station and I can just run in and buy a bottle of water because I'm willing to do so, to me that's not a problem. So I strongly disagree.
I chose strongly disagree as well because drinking water from the tap is also a basic need that the government recognizes that you need for survival. So if somebody wants to spend money to buy something that is freely available in their faucet, more power to him. A fool and his money will soon be parted.
Right. Pierre, the Americans are stupid, but they'll never buy bottled water. Wah, wah.
All right, next statement. Land should not be a commodity to be bought or sold. What?
Strongly disagree. Property is something that our founding fathers really wanted to protect. The mere fact that we have property taxes today, I think, really goes against their wishes. They wanted us to be able to buy and sell land freely and have as much control over that as possible.
I think real estate is one of the most profitable investments a person can make. And again, no one's saying that this would be easy, but it is like a way for an everyman to really get ahead. So buying and selling land, absolutely. That's a game I shouldn't say anyone. That's a game that is reasonable for many people to play.
And really, like, knowing that everybody needs a place to live and that, like, there can sometimes be a housing shortage. And it's like land it's worth a lot to people. And we should be able to enrich our lives by, dipping a toe in the water of this commodity.
And competition is good for the consumer. So if people are competing when they're buying and selling land, if real estate has like healthy free market competition, the consumer, the buyer wins.
Yes, and something the progressives will not tell you is that the lower property taxes are, the lower your rent is. So just keep that in mind at all times. It's regrettable that many personal fortunes are made by people who simply manipulate money and contribute nothing to their society. I gotta say that I think our financial planner does a good job and knows some things I don't. And if he, is willing to help us and I'm willing to pay him, that's something that he should be welcome to do.
I have always felt strongly that if there is a loophole and someone exploits it, why am I mad about that?
Yeah.
The loophole exists and it's not that person's fault that it exists, and more power to somebody smart enough to take advantage. Do I think it's like the high road, the moral thing, the integrity thing? No. But if the loophole's there, it's not the fault of the person who uses it.
Yeah, so I'm going to say strongly agree. Oh, excuse me, strongly disagree.
Yeah, I also chose strongly disagree for a different reason, but same answer. Next statement we have here, protectionism. Protectionism?
Yeah.
Protectionism is sometimes necessary in trade. Ash, explain.
Okay. So basically, this is talking about tariffs, some isolationism in trade,
Protecting American interests on like the global market.
Yeah.
Sort of thing.
So really, like what Trump is doing right now, or even having trade embargoes with certain countries, I don't support anything that inhibits free trade. I really do think that everyone who would like to get involved in free exchange is a willing partner, and both sides can be enriched by that. And really, like when you have free trade, there's a lot of countries you'll be working with that may not go to war with each other because they have a reason to collaborate and get along. So I think free trade not only enriches people's lives, but also can be something that drives peace. So I am definitely not for protectionism. I strongly disagree.
I just chose disagree because I don't have as strong of feelings about it as Ash, but to me it feels like grading on a curve. Like, if you have something to bring to the table, bring it to the table. And if you don't, necessity is the mother of invention. Get better. Like, electronics and robotics are key in Japanese exports, and that's cool. That's where they excel. America has a ton of beautiful prairie farmland, and we have great agricultural exports. That's where we excel. To each their own. Whatever. Find the niche and fill it.
So the only social responsibility of a company should be to deliver profit to its shareholders. I have trouble with this one because I feel like, in truth, it would be neither agree nor disagree, because there's some things like, proper conditions for your company, like your workers, that I think is a social responsibility. But I think what they're actually implying here is that you might, as a company, be required to, I don't know, be philanthropic or give back. And I really don't believe in that. So I'm just going to say agree, not strongly agree for this one. I think it's a little vague.
I fully admit that I'm kind of like looking to Ash on this one because I do see what she's pointing out. Like, it's a problematic question.
Yeah.
Do I think that they should like be responsible and pay their employees properly, have like humane working conditions, take care at least to a basic level of the environment, and not like put radioactive waste in rivers? Yes, those are absolutely responsibilities. But I take her point, so I'm just gonna take her lead on this one.
The rich are taxed too highly. I would say strongly agree, because I believe the rich create jobs. Their not being taxed can lead to innovation, which helps the rest of society and also helps their company, so they create more jobs. I think taxes are detrimental to not only companies, but the people they employ and future innovation.
Yeah, I also chose strongly agree for those reasons. And to add to that, I think everyone is taxed too highly. So
Yeah, agree.
the rich are just another example. Next statement, those with the ability to pay should have access to higher standards of medical care.
I'm going to say strongly agree for this, just because I think that should be true of any industry. If you have more money than others because either you earned it or were given it, you should have access to more options. That's just the way any industry works. So, although I think everybody, I would hope everybody at least has, a modicum of decent care, and I would want the best for people. I do think it would be kind of naive to suggest that people who have more wouldn't have more options or shouldn't. So.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of a false equivalency built into this question. Like, people who have more money have access to a higher standard of medical care, doesn't mean that people without money don't get what they need. So I agree with Ash. Like, this doesn't mean that people aren't receiving basic medical care. This means if you have millions of dollars and you want something like fancy and experimental and you want in-home care and like all the bells and whistles, you should be allowed to purchase that. It's not, I believe that something like that does not detract from the basic needs of regular people who can't afford bells and whistles being met.
Yeah, none of the problems you have are because Elon Musk can get a penis enlargement.
And furthermore, if Elon Musk's penis enlargement costs, like, let's say there's like a 5,000% profit margin on his procedure. I'm not saying that this is the case now, but it is possible and conceivable that that extra profit could go toward providing some basics for somebody who can't pay.
Sure. Government should penalize businesses that mislead the public.
What?
This to me is kind of a BS question, because I would say that it's possible, if you use the term government loosely, that in courts, the government could be involved in a penalization process if one party sues another. But I feel like that's a real loose, use of the word government. I feel like they talk about like fines when they're saying this.
Right. There's already like, what was it, Skechers with their like leg
Yes.
fitness, whatever shoes, and they got sued for false advertising, right?
Yeah. So I would say that in both cases, whether the consumers took them to court or if somebody is advertising falsely and I get on Facebook and X and everything else and I blow them up for like lying. I feel like the market and consumers can already take care of this and the government doesn't need to get involved. So I'm going to go ahead and say that I disagree.
I don't like this question either. I chose agree because I think like there should be some standard of like you can't promise that echinacea is going to make you lose 50 pounds, find a significant other, and make $1 million. Like somebody will fall for that, and is it their fault that they fall for it? Absolutely. But like I think there should be some common sense regulation on stuff like that. So I chose agree. Okay, next statement.
Abortion, when a woman's life is not threatened, should always be illegal.
I think I was kind of clear about this last week, and I stand by my stance. I strongly disagree. I think that this statement does not take into account rape or incest, which I think a woman's choice is key in those situations because she didn't get to decide the situation she's in. And it also doesn't take into account terminal illness of the fetus. Something devastating like Tay Sachs or trisomy 18 or trisomy 13, those fetuses are often born alive and have a torturous existence for a few hours before they die. I am I am not in support of taking a pregnancy like that to term.
Yeah, I think most conservatives would agree with a rape or incest exception, as well as in cases of Tay Sachs or extreme pain for just a little baby. I feel like most would agree that that's not the same as like an abortion of convenience or whatever you want to say. It's really this is too vague a question, so I'm just going to say disagree. I think that there are definitely cases where like people could go either way, like cases of Down syndrome, where I personally would wish that they would carry a baby to term, especially now because maybe they can do even gene editing or something.
Oh yeah, I guess CRISPR can edit out that third 21 chromosome.
But I just think it's too specific, this question. So I would say
I think it's way too limiting. If life of the mother is the only consideration, you haven't considered enough.
All authority should be questioned. Strongly agree.
Yeah, fucking A. Strongly agree. No question there. Next statement: an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth.
I strongly agree with this. I think that sometimes there's no difference between justice and revenge.
I chose agree, just because I worry that there are things I can't think of in this moment that might be outside that rule. I agree to an extent. I think there's issues of like violent crimes that are committed by mentally ill people.
Sure.
or whatever. Like, even in today's criminal justice system, if someone's murdered, we don't necessarily put them to death. If they commit, let's say, like sexual violence, we don't subject them to sexual violence.
Yeah.
There's justice and there's revenge. And to Ash's point, sometimes they overlap, but I think much more often they do not.
Taxpayers should not be expected to prop up any theaters, museums that cannot survive on a commercial basis. I would agree with this.
And my, liberal background or left background, I disagree. I think just because a generation or a snapshot in time of people might not want certain arts or museums to exist doesn't mean that we don't owe that to future generations. When I think about like a museum I really love, like the Detroit Institute of Arts, I would have hated to see that close.
Here's a question though. Would you support that every year or every tax session they first do like a GoFundMe so that any tax collecting was minimized?
I would agree with that. I think that the people who care about that the most fervently should be the ones who make the most fervent effort to support it. I think that's totally fair. I would just hate to see. I would hate to see them close.
Schools should not make classroom attendance compulsory.
I have so many questions as a follow up to this. Like, what, like grade schools? Are we
Probably
talking about
like truancy laws.
truancy? So, but truancy does not include like homeschooled kids, right? So we're
Right.
talking about kids who are getting no education whatsoever, either at home or at a public institution. Like, should that be illegal for like children to not be educated? Is that the question? Is that the statement?
It's classroom attendance. So I think it is like if you're going to government schools. I recently saw a story where there was a young girl with special needs who had a medical emergency, and here in the state of Michigan, the mother was charged and arrested for her daughter's truancy because authorities and the school didn't take time to get the full story.
Well, that's just stupid.
Yeah, and I feel like that may not always be the case, but I don't feel like government, especially like the federal government, should have any part in education. I feel like they do a hack job, and I'm just going to go ahead and say no on this one.
I once again only slightly disagree with you, but it changed my answer. I think that enough kids could be neglected or slip through the cracks if truancy laws were just revoked. I don't think it helps 100% of kids. I think there are cases, like you're saying, where it's been like wrongfully enforced or like they haven't done their due diligence to look into the situation. But I think truancy helps more kids than it hurts, and that's my unqualified opinion. Okay, the next statement we have here: all people have their rights, but it is better for all of us that different sorts of people should keep to their own kind. What the fuck?
So let's just strongly disagree with that one. Wow.
All right.
It's natural for children to keep some secrets from their parents, of course.
Yes, strongly agree. Have you seen a child?
A child.
All right, possessing marijuana for personal use should not be a criminal offense.
Strongly agree.
Strongly agree. I have personal bias here.
I feel like possessing any substance to put in your own body should not be a criminal offense, personally.
And if we want to like make it, as the statement did, specific to marijuana, like so many states have already disagreed with the federal ruling on this that the feds don't even, like, they're an inch away from just revoking the federal ban on marijuana. It's so stupid. It's a plant.
If Trump is smart, days before leaving office, he will just do everything he can to legalize marijuana. And I think the next Republican will just walk into office because they'll get the libertarian vote.
Fucking A, right. The prime function of schooling should be to equip future generations to find jobs.
I strongly agree with that.
Yeah, I strongly agree with that. What's the point of being educated if... Okay, so yeah, education for its own right exists. It should teach you how to think and not what to think. It should teach you, I don't know, to become the person that you are. But you should leave with some fucking skills. Like, I mean, what good is philosophy if you can't eat?
And this is the prime function, so it's not to say that education can't have other functions. It's just the prime directive should be that you can support yourself in the future.
This is very Star Trek-y, prime directive. I like that.
People with serious inheritable disabilities should not be allowed to reproduce.
I can't believe this is a fucking question.
I'm going to go ahead and strongly disagree because I have some of those. And I should be allowed even
narrow or strongly defined disabilities. I have clinical depression, and if I had wanted to have kids, I don't need the government telling me whether or not I should. I have a mother for that.
If we could both just reproduce together, we'd have like a little crippled, sad child.
But they'd be beautiful.
Yeah,
they'd be so cute.
Okay.
All right, next statement. The most important thing for children is to learn to accept discipline. What the fuck?
I strongly disagree.
Disagree.
What is this bastard out of Carolina? Those who are able to work and refuse the opportunity should not expect society's support. I agree with this as someone who physically struggles and has 2 jobs. I feel like anybody who is refusing work, who is able-bodied, is a drain on society and a piece of shit.
I chose strongly agree because I do strongly agree. If you have the ability to work and you choose not to, you've chosen your fate, and I could give a fuck.
First-generation immigrants can never fully integrate within their new country. Strongly disagree.
Yeah, that's stupid.
Yeah.
Especially in a country like ours where it's a melting pot. You don't need to be like a white Anglo-Saxon American, whatever. What is it? WASP? White Anglo-Saxon Protestant to like be an American.
The question is basically trying to like suss out whether we're like nationalistic fascists.
Are you an Aryan supremacist?
No.
All right, next statement. What's good for the most successful corporation is always, ultimately, good for all of us. I disagree because nobody can tell me what's good for all of us. Like, that's such there's no such thing as a blanket statement.
I feel like if this one was neither agree nor disagree, I would probably go with that, but I'll just disagree because, I mean, what if the most popular corporation is like doing stuff that we don't think is necessarily good for our kids, and if they're really successful and we'd rather our kids not see like an entertainment piece that they put out, it's not necessarily going to be good for everybody, so it's just too broad a statement.
Yeah, I feel like more information is needed.
Yeah.
Last statement on this page. No broadcasting institution, however independent its content, should receive public funding.
I agree with that just because I feel like pretty much every broadcasting institution has some bias, and if the public is funding it, you then have a bunch of taxpayers who are probably funding other people's leanings, and if you're good enough and you have an audience, you should be able to stay on. And like, look at us, we probably have like 5 people listening tops any given week, and here we are. I have a weirdly specific qualm here. Okay.
The National Weather Service. Like, it's not sexy. Nobody wants to support it. Like, they're not going to get great, flashy advertising. But it is detrimentally important to our country and, like, down to, like, the military and farmers and everyday people. The National Weather Service is important.
Here's something, though. If you could pay a subscription fee and get your weather, maybe, like, people would do it.
I think it's too important. And I think everybody needs it, like, including... Like I said, institutions like the military and schools and travel. That's my opinion.
Well, maybe you could put it as part of like the military budget and like make taxpayers pay for it. But my thing is we all need food too, and I don't want to pay for anybody else's.
Well, we all need food, and shouldn't farmers know what the weather's going to be?
Well, sure, but farmers can pay for it.
Oh my God. Okay. That's my answer.
Okay.
Next statement.
And how you see wider society, our civil liberties are being excessively curbed in the name of counterterrorism. I'm going to, even though obviously I don't like terrorists, going to strongly agree with this because we have things like the Patriot Act where they listen to Americans probably more than they listen to terrorists.
It's funny how much we're not lining up on this. I said disagree. Not strongly, but I disagree because I know that stupid fucking quote about like those who would trade their freedom for security deserve neither. I don't care if Uncle Sam wants to listen to me talk in my living room. Come at me, bro. Like, I don't know. I guess I don't care. Like if you're gonna catch a terrorist by listening to me in my living room, maybe that's cool. I don't think you will. I think it's a waste of time, but like, I don't know. I just chose to disagree.
Yeah, and I would just rather the TSA not have some big lady who's pulling me aside and patting me down when I've done nothing wrong. And
those husky women really like you.
yeah, it's a it's a problem at airports. A significant advantage of a one-party state is that it avoids all arguments that delay progress in a democratic political system.
What in the fucking socialist bullshit is this?
Well,
strongly disagree.
Strongly disagree. And also, we don't have a democratic political system that is run by the tyranny of the majority, and I'm glad of it.
Yeah, so, you lost me at one party state.
Yeah. All right.
Next statement. Although the electronic age... Who wrote this? Although the electronic age makes official surveillance easier, only wrongdoers need to be worried.
Oh, I'm going to strongly disagree with this.
I know what the correct answer is. I know what the American answer is, but I agree. If somebody wants to, like, I don't know, see my Pinterest and, like...
Hannah forgets that I'm probably on a bunch of lists already, so...
Well, you probably are, but, like, what of it? So keep your little stupid list. She hasn't done anything.
The death penalty should be an option for most serious crimes. I can only, like, say agree because strongly agree. Does that imply that, like, the state is defining what's... I have to say disagree, I guess. Because although I think we should be maybe putting down child rapists and stuff like that, if the government can willy-nilly decide what's a serious crime at any time, they decide that misdemeanors are now serious crimes. I don't know. But if it's murder or rape, I'm pro death penalty. It's a weird question, though.
I guess I'm surprised by your answer. As you were reading it, I checked strongly agree. Okay. I think the worst crimes equate to the worst punishment. And if you're, hey, I guess we're talking about some real issues here. Mm-hmm. If you expect me as a taxpayer to pay for the room and board for some child rapist serial killer, fuck you. Like, yeah.
Well, I think they should put down child rapists too, but
I'll pay a one-time injection fee. I'm not paying for that motherfucker to live. And, come at me, I guess, but that's my opinion.
Yeah, I guess I just don't. I need, as you said, check C for more information. I need to know what serious crimes are designated as before I can answer that appropriately, I guess. In a civilized society, one must always have people above to be obeyed and people below to be commanded. Well, no.
That's really un-American. Strongly disagree. The government is our employee, and we hired them to run the show in the way we see fit, and that should always be front of mind.
Yes.
Next statement. Abstract art that doesn't represent anything shouldn't be considered art at all. Why is this political?
I don't think this is a question that belongs here, but I'm just going to say strongly agree because fuck Picasso.
Picasso?
Fuck Picasso.
It's funny, I feel like we have the same feelings about these statements, but we're checking really different answers. I said disagree because I don't feel like the government gets to decide what art is.
No, I don't think the government gets to decide either, but I just agree with the statement, so that's what I'm going with. Like Jackson Pollock. I mean,
Jackson Pollock is trash, but if somebody wants to spend their money and build a museum,
I think
cool, fine, whatever.
That's fine. If people can buy the banana duct tape to the wall, and that's fine with me, but I still don't consider it art.
Well, I just don't get the point of this question in this quiz.
Yeah.
Moving on. In criminal justice, punishment should be more important than rehabilitation.
I'm going to go ahead and say agree instead of strongly agree, because I do think that there are people who can be rehabilitated, but there are cases in which the person can't be, and we're not then concerned with rehabilitating them so much as punishing them, like in the cases of murder.
So I chose disagree for the exact same reason. I think that if there is an opportunity to rehabilitate, that is to me like the prime, the most optimal choice. In keeping with that theme, the next statement, it is a waste of time to try to rehabilitate some criminals.
I'll agree just based on what we just said.
I said strongly agree because I don't think enough people are admitting that right now.
Gotcha.
There are so many people, like I think I've mentioned this before, I'm really into like true crime documentaries, and I've listened to a really popular true crime podcast all the time. People are being let out left and right for like no reason. And I think if we admit to ourselves that it's okay to give up on some people,
Yeah.
I really do believe it, because some people just have no interest in changing ever. Strongly agree from me.
The business person and the manufacturer are more important than the writer or the artist. I'm just going to say disagree, because I would say that in general, I think they contribute more to society, but I still think art is important. I wanted to be a screenwriter, so maybe I'm one of those useless people.
I originally had marked agree when Ash started talking, and then listening to her, it reminded me of something that I really do believe, that to be human is to push through pain and to push through anguish and still find something beautiful and worth moving on for. And I think the writer and the entertainer is the doctor of people's souls. Like, if you can lessen the pain of existing, you've done something incomprehensibly beautiful. And so I disagree with that statement that entertainment and art are definitely just as important as business.
Something that I always think of too is that during the Great Depression, the only industries that were doing well were movies and alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like sometimes people just need to get through things.
Yeah.
So
this next statement is hilarious. Mothers may have careers, but their first duty is to be homemakers.
I would disagree with that strongly. Hannah and I both have jobs, and we'd still take care of each other, and we don't rear children.
It's just bullshit. It's like spot the inflexible Nazi question. Not falling for it.
Almost all politicians promise economic growth, but we should heed the warnings of climate science that growth is detrimental to our efforts to curb global warming. I would say that this is one of those like veiled progressive statements that really, like, you can care about both, certainly, but I don't think that economic growth is a detriment to, like, the climate in general.
I am going to preface my statement as saying I work in a cytogenetics lab, and my career is science. So you can't tell me I don't respect science. You can't tell me I don't respect research and peer-reviewed fact.
Mm-hmm.
I honor science above religion and almost all other things. I have seen conflicting scientific evidence on climate change. So you can't tell me that the climate change science we have is the authority on what's happening in our world today. I'm not sure. And I think that is the most responsible thing a scientific-minded person can say is, I'm not sure. So I feel like the premise of this question is silly, and I'm going to disagree.
Making peace with the establishment is an important aspect of maturity.
What? This is such a problematic statement. I don't know where to begin.
Yeah, I feel like in a way it's kind of like dependent on how you take their meaning of establishment. Like, to an extent, I agree with the fact that maybe if you're a libertarian, you're not going to get your way, and maybe like voting for the lesser of two evils is the best way to influence what's happening. That maybe libertarians should be jumping in as Republicans if they really want to affect change, that kind of stuff. But grand scheme, I'm going to just have to disagree, because it's like, to me, what you're saying is that you have to accept the established norm, and obviously I think the overthrow of the British colonial empire in the United States shows that you don't always have to accept the status quo, and you can be mature and make something better.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a sign of maturity to accept that you're not always going to get your way. And just because you vote a certain way and believe in a certain thing doesn't mean that the majority agrees with you. And it doesn't mean what you voted for is going to happen. It doesn't give you the right to question into the legitimacy, the outcome of an election or something like that. So you need to make peace with the democratic process. But yeah.
It's just not worded very well, I didn't think, but.
All right, winding up on page 5.
Okay, astrology accurately explains many things.
What the fuck?
I'm just going to say strongly disagree. I don't really believe in astrology. I think it's kind of fun to dip your toe in the water, but I mean...
I think astrology is, I believe in it, even as a science-minded person. I think like person to person and like in interpersonal relationships, astrology is really helpful. But I can say that it doesn't explain many things, and outside of just like helping understand archetypes and personality sets, what? No, absolutely not. Strongly disagree. You cannot be moral without being religious. As an agnostic, strongly fucking disagree.
I strongly disagree as well. I think that obviously I married Hannah because whether she has religion or not, I think she's an inherently moral person who I love and respect.
And listen, if your religious rules are the things that are keeping you from being a bad person, you're a bad person.
Charity is better than Social Security as a means of helping the genuinely disadvantaged. I would strongly agree with the statement. I feel like Social Security is a Ponzi scheme. We were, again, listening to that A Time for Choosing speech. And even back in 1964, it turned out that if a man paid into Social Security and there was just a fund for him and he wasn't, taxed on it, any of that, that he would actually have double, having just saved the money, then he would get back. And now it's just like we're on the brink of that slush fund collapsing.
So I chose agree and not strongly agree only because I don't believe necessarily in the charity of enough people to take care of the people who require it. That being said, I don't think the government is the answer. They're doing a terrible job. I think if you somehow privatized it, we could do a better job and help more people. I don't think charity can be relied upon, but I think a private sector solution is probably what's best.
I'm having trouble with this one. It says some people are naturally unlucky. I don't really believe in luck, but I do think a lot of people can have bad things happen to them, and you can look at somebody and just know that they've had a rough life. So I'm not sure how to answer it.
I'm saying disagree because I think in true meaning of the term luck, it's random, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think one person is ever typically plagued by bad luck throughout their entire life, although it may feel that way.
Yeah, I'll just say disagree too.
Yeah, I mean, let's keep random.
It is important that my child's school instills religious values. I believe in the separation of church and state, and unless I decide to send my child to a religious school, I wouldn't personally, I'm going to say no.
Yeah, and as a product of religious school, I can think of very few more damaging ideas. So strongly disagree.
Sex outside marriage is usually immoral. I'm going to say disagree. I think most people have premarital or other kinds of sex.
I am a biology major. Like, animals have sex. End of story. I strongly disagree that it is immoral to have sex outside of marriage. Marriage is a government institution.
A same-sex couple in a stable, loving relationship should not be excluded from the possibility of child adoption. I think we would make ballin' parents. I just don't like kids.
Yeah, if we liked kids, Ash, I think you'd be... I cannot imagine like a better mother than Ash. And frankly, I have to say, to my own horn here, I have been told that I might be a bad mother by certain people in my life. I think I'd be a fucking great mom.
Yeah, I think they're jelly.
I think so too. I'm a great mom to our kids who have 4 paws.
Yeah, she really is.
All right, here we go. Pornography depicting consenting adults should be legal for the adult population.
Strongly agree.
Strongly agree as well. You can do what you want, including sex work.
I hope that there's no coercion, like drugs involved, but as long as people are consenting adults and they're able to consent, then...
And I think the more you destigmatize it, the more you're attracting people who want to do it because they want to do it and not because they're being forced into it or like snatched off the streets or whatever.
What goes on in a private bedroom between consenting adults is no business of the state. Strongly agree.
Strongly agree. This is the sexuality stage. My father listens to this podcast. The next statement is, no one can feel naturally homosexual. Here we are, red, white, and bi. Have you checked out our title?
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with, the premise of the question because I think I know what they're implying, but I do think most people are bisexual.
I think most people are bisexual too. I think it would be rare to find someone totally hetero or totally homosexual. I realize they exist. I'm not here to tell someone what their experience is, but I think most of us fall somewhere in between.
Yeah, I'm a 5. I'm pretty close to Kinsey 6 gay, but I still think Tom Hardy and John Bernthal are attractive.
When I first got with Ash, I think it was like a 2, and the longer I'm with her, the more I look at my childhood and my past, I'm like, wait a minute, I think I'm firmly 3. I like it all.
These days, openness about sex has gone too far. I guess I'm just going to agree with this because I feel like there are some cases where kids are being groomed and stuff, and I don't think that's like necessarily the norm or anything like that, but I think there are cases where kids are being brought in a very institutionalized way that isn't fair to them.
I chose disagree to this statement that it has gone too far, and only because I think there's something to be said about the way Europe treats it versus the way we treat it. I think we're uptight about it to the point of like obsession. And like if we just like calmed down a little bit and didn't make it a big deal, it wouldn't be a big deal. Like, I don't know. I think we could be a little bit more laid back about it and just like, who cares who's got what in their clothes and who cares who's doing what with whom in their bedroom. I don't get why it's such a topic of conversation. I mean, I guess I do, but I don't think it needs to be.
Yeah, and I would say maybe if Europe wasn't so obsessed with sex, they wouldn't be bonking 15-year-olds, but anyway. So, I think we're finally to the results, Andy.
Guys, we finally fucking did it.
Now let's see where you stand.
Okay. So this political compass is divided into quadrants, like any good graph. And again, to recap what Ash said, the further vertical you go, the further up you go, it's more authoritarian, and down is more libertarian or like a lack of authority. To the left is heavier spending of the government. To the right is less spending by the government. So I wound up in the purple quadrant, which is the lower right, but I'm pretty close to the middle as far as left-right goes. I am firmly in the bottom, though.
So if I go down, I am, again, lower right quadrant like Hannah. I am one box away from the farthest right that you could possibly be in terms of fiscal responsibility and freedom.
Whereas I'm almost nearly on the border.
Yeah, and so Hannah is like very much center right, whereas I am pretty I basically named a blog in the past over Ayn Rand, like after Ayn Rand's statement that I'm a radical for capitalism. And then I'm also about 4 boxes down in terms of how libertarian I am.
We're pretty close to the same vertical score.
Yeah, so we don't want people in our bedrooms, in our lives,
our education.
Yeah, but we definitely differ a bit in terms of how much fiscal freedom people should
What
have.
do you think it is, Ash, that's keeping us from being further down than we are?
I think that probably further down you'd have anarchists. I think both you and I believe in limited government. Probably, we believe in the court system. I think something that might be putting us where we are is that we both believe in the death penalty.
It makes us both a little bit in favor of at least some government authority.
Yes. Some libertarians I know don't believe in the death penalty at all, and I know that anarchists definitely wouldn't. So we would differ from them in that way.
So based on these results, it's telling me that my closest like celebrity or like famous analogous person is actually John F. Kennedy, which I feel pretty fucking cool about. Like JFK, people loved him. I feel like he was a symbol of like young America who believed in taking care of each other, who believed in doing the right thing by each other, no man left behind kind of ethos. But also like that rugged American individualism where like you determine your fate. Nobody gets to tell you what to do.
He actually brought income tax down from something like 90%. It was like crazy.
That's incredible. We actually learned that from Ash's parents this weekend. 90% is untenable. I can't even imagine that. I'm so pissed about like 36% right now.
Yeah, and I actually typically line up with Milton Friedman, which makes sense. He's one of my favorite economists. He was a mentor to Thomas Sowell, who is now definitely my favorite economist. He was somebody that I look up to in terms of like what is the right amount of government intervention. So basically what we'd like to do is screen cap our results and share that with you guys so you can just kind of see the difference between where I landed and where Hannah landed. Definitely, I will link the quiz because I would love for you guys to take the quiz and see where you land as well. It's been really fun just kind of like talking about issues rather than talking about just news with you this time. And I think it's something that, if we can figure out more fun ideas of how to do that with you guys, we will.
And we're figuring this out in real time, but maybe that should be the subject of our poll. Maybe we would love to hear from you guys. Do you want like us to focus strictly on news? Do you like talking about these issues? Like we talked about abortion a little bit on last week's episode. Obviously, we're talking about the political compass quiz on this episode. Or do you prefer sort of a mix?
Yeah, so let us know what you think. We'll give those 3 responses and let us know where you land on that. And please share and comment so that we can figure out where you landed. Share your images of the political compass that you landed on. And we'd love to learn more about our audience.
For sure, guys. This is a really cool tool, and I think it sparks some important conversation. Like even people like Ash and I, we agree so much on things. And you heard a couple questions in this test. We actually have the exact same opinion about it, but chose 2 different answers. So we're really curious to see where people land. I think variety is what makes this country great. And we're curious to hear where you're coming from.
Well, thank you for listening. I know it's a little bit late, but we wish you a happy Independence Day weekend and fun with your family and barbecues and fireworks and all that good stuff.
May you keep all your fingers and toes. May your lawns be unscorched. And may freedom ring.